former chairman of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Strong advocate for the Coast Guard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate you and, of course, the Chairman, Mr. Cummings, and Mr. Lobiondo for this bill. It's a good piece of legislation. I look forward to the passage, and I'll do everything I can to try to encourage my senators, and I'm sure they will, to get this passed. I was just talking to the Commandant yesterday, and he's been a Commandant for 4 years and hasn't been authorized. You think about that. That's just not a real good thing. So just for him, we ought to do it. I did have two amendments, Mr. Chairman, and discussing with you and with the staff, I'm not going to offer them, but I'd like to bring the attention and hope we might consider this as we have further markup. We have the largest fishery in the world in Alaska, in the Bering Sea. We have a changing climate, which will probably increase the capability of more shipping lanes, more responsibilities for the Coast Guard, and my amendment would have, in fact, recognized forward basing, closest to the action. One of them is in St. Paul and St. George. One of them freezes, one of them does not. My amendment doesn't specifically say that, but when we consider this bill down the line, as we give more responsibility, and you mentioned the fact that 39,000, whatever it was, and then over the years, we kept adding 20, and during your tenure, my tenure, we've added so many responsibilities, but now we add another responsibility, and it's the Arctic Ocean. We are an Arctic nation because of Alaska. There's going to be traffic from overseas, ships going close to our shores, and we need to be stationed and in proximity where they can respond to a threat to our waters and rescue those that possibly could be caught in the ice, etc. So as we work through this, I'm hoping that we can possibly have an opportunity to improve it. If not, I again congratulate the chairman and the ranking member for an excellent bill, and we'll look forward to passing this legislation. And I again congratulate you. I am the longest serving member on the Coast Guard committee. You served as long as staffer and as member. But I've been on this committee longer than anybody else, and it's something I hold dear to my heart. It's a great organization. They have good men, good people. Mr. Lobiondo talked about the housing part. We are working very hard to make sure that happens. Retention and having professionals, and they are, and we just want to continue. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for yielding.
I fondly remember our service together on Merchant Marine and Fisheries Committee when the gentleman time and again say, as Alaska's only representative in Congress, and a lot of people needed to know that because they didn't know that Alaska had only one, but it seemed like 2 or 3 or 4 when he was on that committee. And indeed, the Bering Sea fishery, if you watch the Coast Guard channel, as I call it, the Weather Channel with the Deadliest Catch series, you get some idea of how treacherous those conditions are and why we need to pay attention. And if also you consider the Coast Guard is now in its 5th department. The authorizing language for the Coast Guard, if you take a look at the opening language of our bill, the Secretary of the department in which the Coast Guard is located. There's no other authorization that has those words. The Secretary of the department in which the Coast Guard is located. It's because they move around. It's like nomads. You know, they don't move, Congress moves them. And I distinctly remember the time at the White House when the then chairman of this committee, Mr. Young, said to President Bush, "Don't mess with my Coast Guard." I nudged him and said, "It's our Coast Guard." But we stood together to say, don't move the Coast Guard into the Department of Homeland Security. Oh, it's going to get more money, it'll be more robust, but that hasn't budged at all. Hasn't changed things at all.
Mr. Chairman, if you just yield for one moment, if you remember in that meeting that they had the Coast Guard under the Border Patrol.
That's correct.
And I said, Mr. President, and you were with me, sitting right with me, I says, if it's not parallel as the Secretary of Homeland Security, you're not going to get a bill. And if you look at the structures, the way it's at, if I had my way, I'd move them again. I'd move them into their own department. And that'd be the best thing we could do, but people don't want to do that because they're afraid they won't be funded. But I'm not going to let some other secretary dictate to the Coast Guard what their mission is. That's our job.
Well, you're quite right to recall that. And had we not stood, and you led the way, had we not stood for that, Coast Guard would have been some sub-agency under a very Coast Guard, under what you call it, Customs and Border Patrol, where things are all badly screwed up still. Enough of my frustration with that Homeland Security Department. Do other members wish to be heard on the Coast Guard?
Mr. Chairman, move